It was supposed to be just another fun night on TV. Bright lights, big laughs, some clapping, and a few lighthearted jokes. The Late Late Show with James Corden was known for its playful vibe, where celebrities came to share stories and have a good time. But on this night, when James Corden said something a little too sharp, a little too personal, Keanu Reeves didn't laugh. He didn't yell or storm off. He just looked up from his seat, calm and steady. And in that one moment, everything in the studio changed. What Keanu said next didn't just quiet the room. It started a fire online that spread like wildfire and still hasn't burned out. Oh, and before we dive in, tell us in the comments, what's the one thing you love most about Keanu Reeves? It was 11:37 p.m. in the Los Angeles studio. The lights flared on, bright and warm, as the camera glided over the audience like a dancer, moving in time with the house band's playful, slowed-down version of Sweet Child O' Mine. The music was cheeky, almost poking fun at itself, setting the tone for another night of comedy. James Corden burst onto the stage, half dancing, half bouncing, his energy big, loud, and perfectly practiced. The audience roared with cheers, not because they were surprised, but because they knew their role. This was the cue to clap, to laugh, to play along. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome. Welcome to the only show where the host is still recovering from the last one, James said with a grin, his British accent sharp and charming. The crowd laughed right on time. He stopped mid-step to tease a camera operator. Steve, mate, that shirt again? We talked about this. At this point, it's not a fashion choice. It's a public cry for help. The audience laughed louder, and James winked, riding the wave of their energy. We've got a great show tonight, folks, and not just because the interns are watching. The mood was loose, a bit smug, but safe. It was the kind of night where everyone knew what to expect. Some jokes about the news, a few pokes at LA traffic, and a celebrity guest who'd play along with James' quick wit. After riffing on the day's headlines, something about a politician's bad tweet and the endless gridlock on the 405 freeway, James shuffled the note cards on his desk with a dramatic flick, like a magician setting up a trick. And now, our first guest tonight. You know him as Neo from The Matrix, as John Wick from, well, John Wick, and as the only guy who can make silence feel like a whole speech. Please welcome the one, the only Keanu Reeves. The crowd erupted into applause, but this wasn't just the usual celebrity cheer. Keanu wasn't just famous, he was a legend, a man wrapped in humility, someone who carried a quiet strength that made people lean in. James, of course, couldn't resist a jab. With a sly smirk, he added, "Let's see if we can get him to say more than 3 words tonight." The audience laughed, some genuinely, some a little unsure, sensing the edge in his tone. The studio doors swung open, and there he was, Keanu Reeves. He stepped out in a dark suit, clean and classic, with a small silver cross necklace just visible under his collar. His walk was calm, unhurried, like he had nothing to prove. The crowd gave him a standing ovation, their cheers louder and longer than for most guests. Keanu smiled softly, almost shyly, and gave a small bow before sitting down across from James. The host leaned in, acting overly eager, adjusting his note cards like he was preparing for a comedy battle. The smirk was back. "Keanu, always a pleasure. I swear, when you're here, the whole room shifts, probably because everyone's waiting for you to just nod and bless us with a single word." The audience laughed again. Keanu gave a polite, small smile, his eyes steady. James turned to the crowd, pointing at Keanu. "See that? That's the face I'm talking about." Keanu leaned forward slightly and said, "Thanks for having me, James." 3 words, clear and simple. The crowd burst into laughter, and James raised his hands like he'd just won a prize. 3 words already. We're on a roll, folks. The segment started light. They joked about John Wick, how Keanu does his own stunts, and why he stays off social media. James brought up the famous Sad Keanu meme, a photo of him eating alone on a park bench. "Keanu, come on, do you just carry sadness in your pocket, or is that your brand now?" The crowd laughed, enjoying the tease. Keanu's response was quick and calm. "No sadness, just lunch." The audience loved it, clapping and cheering. James pretended to be frustrated, throwing his hands up. "You see what I'm dealing with? I'm trying to get stories, and he gives me haikus." More laughter filled the room. Everything seemed to be rolling along smoothly, like any other late-night show. But there was a shift so small it was almost invisible, like a single wrong note in a song. You could barely hear it, but it was there, changing the mood in the room. Then James pushed a little harder. "Be honest, Keanu. Have you ever thought about living like a normal person? paying bills, yelling at traffic, maybe getting ghosted on Tinder. The audience laughed, but the sound was thinner, less full than before. Keanu's expression didn't change much, but there was a subtle tightening around his eyes, a moment of stillness that felt heavy. James didn't seem to notice, or maybe he did and decided to keep going. I mean, you walk like a monk, talk like a monk. Are you secretly in a cult? Should we be worried? A few people laughed, but it was scattered, uneasy. Keanu smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Then James, riding the habit of late-night banter, went further. Seriously, man, do you still think you're relevant, or are you just clinging to the roles that made you famous? A handful of people laughed, but many didn't. The room changed, not loudly, not with a gasp, but with a quiet weight. Keanu adjusted the cuff of his sleeve slowly, deliberately. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes locked on James, calm but unreadable. He smiled, but it wasn't kind. James shifted in his seat, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face. Keanu cleared his throat, and what he said next made the whole studio forget this was supposed to be a comedy show. The joke wasn't on Keanu anymore, it was on James. The studio went still, like the moment before a storm hits. It wasn't awkward yet, but everyone felt something big building, something unspoken rising in the air. No one knew whether to laugh, hold their breath, or look away. Keanu sat back, calm and composed, his cufflinks catching the light as he folded his hands in his lap. The audience was quiet now, not tense but focused, hanging on his next move. Something had shifted, and James Corden felt it, even if he wasn't ready to admit it. There's something strange about how silence makes people uncomfortable, Keanu said, his voice low but steady, every word clear. No one laughed. Every eye in the room was on him. James blinked, unsure whether to jump in or let Keanu keep going. Keanu continued, his tone even. People often think quiet means weakness, but silence can be a kind of power, too. It wasn't a punchline, but it landed hard, sinking into the crowd. James chuckled nervously, trying to pull the energy back to his side. Okay, I'll admit, you've got away with words when you choose to use them. Just wish you'd use them to tell me if John Wick survives the next movie. A few polite laughs broke the silence, but they felt forced. Keanu gave a faint smile, but his body language didn't budge. He wasn't playing the late-night game anymore. The interview kept going, but it had a new edge, like a conversation that had turned serious without warning. James tried to lighten things up, steering to safer topics. He asked about Keanu's love for motorcycles, brought up funny fan encounters, and circled back to internet memes. Keanu answered, but his responses were short, precise, like he was choosing every word carefully. He wasn't cold or rude, just deliberate. The crowd started to feel it. This wasn't a man hiding his personality. This was a man who didn't need to perform. James, sensing the shift, tried another jab. Keanu, you're so zen, like a monk. Come on, don't you ever just lose it? Scream into a pillow, throw something at a wall, like us normal folks. The laughter was thinner this time, barely there. Keanu tilted his head slightly. Anger's easy. Anyone can shout. That was it. No smile, no extra explanation. James squirmed in his seat. Right, but you've screamed into a pillow, right? Please tell me you're not that balanced. A few chuckles came from the crowd, but they faded fast. Keanu's eyes didn't waver. Why do people find peace suspicious? That line hit differently. No laughter now, just a room slowly waking up to itself. James tried to pivot, forcing a grin. Okay, you've got this calm, cool aura. It's awesome, but don't you ever wish you were more normal? Like just a regular guy. The question was framed as a joke, but it had a sting, and the audience felt it. A few people shifted in their seats, glances darting around. Keanu let a few seconds pass, the silence heavy. Maybe normal isn't the goal, he said finally. A handful of people clapped, not loud, but real, their hands coming together like they'd heard something true. James laughed too quickly, twirling his pen nervously. All right, Socrates. No normal, no noise, just pure zen. The pen tapped against the desk, a small, anxious sound that hadn't seemed noticeable until now. But James couldn't let it go. He leaned in, smirking again. Come on, Keanu, half your charm is how mysterious you are, right? You're like this puzzle we all want to solve. Keanu raised an eyebrow, then leaned forward slightly, his voice still calm but firm. Funny how when someone doesn't play the game, they're called boring or strange. That line hit hard, like a stone dropped into still water. The room went quiet. James' smile twitched, hollow now. He looked down at his note cards, shuffling them like they held the answer to getting the show back on track. The silence grew heavier. A woman in the audience shifted uncomfortably. Another whispered to her friend, "Why does this feel so tense?" James tried again, his tone softer now. "Look, I'm just teasing, you know that, right? It's part of the bit. We mess around, you give me one-liners, I give you a hard time. That's how this works." Keanu nodded, but then he said something no one expected. "Ever wonder why most jokes need someone to be the punchline?" A full second of silence stretched out, then another. One person in the back clapped instinctively, then stopped, embarrassed. James froze, just for a moment, but the cameras caught it, a crack in his usual polished mask. Keanu wasn't angry. That was the worst part for James. He was calm, grounded, present. His words carried more weight than all the monologues James had ever delivered. The host tried to reset the mood, desperate to steer things back to comedy. All right, next segment. We've got a clip of Keanu teaching puppies, thank goodness. Let's roll that." The audience laughed, but it was out of relief, not joy. The laughter didn't erase what had just happened. It echoed inside it. Keanu smiled, leaned back, and let the clip play. The moment passed, but it didn't fade. Backstage, behind the flashing lights and busy crew, people were already whispering. "Did you feel that? Was that supposed to happen? Was that real?" A stagehand shook his head, muttering, "That wasn't in the script." James tried to keep the rest of the show light. He joked with the musical guest, landed a few decent punchlines, and closed with his usual charm, but his timing was off. The audience could tell, and so could he. When the credits rolled, people filed out of the studio, but they weren't buzzing with excitement like usual. They were quiet, thinking, carrying something heavier in their heads. Not the jokes, not the cute puppy clip, but Keanu, his poise, his silence, and the way he turned a comedy show into something deeper, something real. Backstage, James paced, muttering to himself. He didn't get it. It was just a joke. But by then, a production assistant had pulled out their phone, and someone in the third row of the audience had uploaded a shaky video with the caption, "Keanu shuts down Corden with 3 perfect sentences." By the next morning, that video had over 6 million views and was still climbing. The air in the studio had shifted after Keanu's words. Not dramatically, no gasps or crashes, but it was quieter, like the soundproof walls were holding something in. Keanu sat calmly, legs crossed, hands folded in his lap, his posture unchanged from the start. The audience wasn't watching a celebrity anymore. They were watching someone who felt like a mirror, reflecting something they recognized in themselves. He glanced at James, not with anger or defense, but with presence. "There's something strange about how silence makes people uncomfortable," he said again, his voice smooth and measured. "Maybe that's why people try to fill it so fast with jokes, with noise, with assumptions." The audience didn't move. James didn't interrupt. Keanu continued, "You asked if I want to be normal. I think we confuse normal with being loud, with being everywhere, with proving something." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, floating between the chairs, the cameras, and the expectations of a late-night show. Some people aren't built to perform all the time. They're built to show up quietly, fully, without needing to be the center. No one clapped yet, but the room was alive with thought. A man in the front row nodded slowly, his face serious. A young woman 3 rows back put her phone down, not even realizing she'd stopped recording. Keanu turned slightly toward James, not to challenge him, but to share something real. "There's a kind of humor that connects, that lifts people up, that sees them," he said, pausing for a moment. "And there's a kind that hides, that mocks, that uses laughter as a shield." A few people glanced around, unsure whether to laugh or stay quiet. Keanu smiled faintly. Funny how when someone doesn't play the game, they're called boring or strange. That line landed deep, the kind of deep that doesn't make you clap. It makes you think. James' usual smirk twitched at the corners. He tried to keep the energy moving. "I mean, it's a talk show. We're here to entertain, to joke. It's never personal." Keanu nodded, but his response was gentle and piercing. Entertainment doesn't have to mean humiliation. James leaned forward, his pen tapping the desk again, faster now. "So, what are you saying? We shouldn't joke anymore? We have to tiptoe around feelings." Keanu tilted his head slightly. "I'm saying people notice when the joke only works because someone else stays silent." The silence in the room grew thicker. Then, from the back rows, a slow, unsure ripple of applause started. It wasn't loud, but it was real, like something sacred had been said. Keanu didn't bask in it. He folded his hands again and let the moment pass through the room like a breeze. James laughed, but it sounded thin, almost brittle. Wow, this got deep fast. You're like a Zen sniper. You don't say much, but every shot hits. A few polite chuckles came from the crowd, but they felt hollow. Keanu didn't smile back. He just nodded. You don't need to raise your voice to make yourself heard. That line was final, not dramatic or defiant, but definitive. The audience didn't laugh. They leaned in, hanging on his words. And James Corden, for the first time in a long time, realized he'd lost control of the room. Not because someone out-joked him, but because someone out-presented him. The interview wrapped up soon after. James did what he always did. Thanked Keanu, tossed to a commercial, and threw in a quick one-liner to ease the tension. But the audience was still inside that moment, replaying Keanu's words in their heads. The segment went viral almost instantly, clips spreading online before the episode even finished airing. One was captioned, Keanu Reeves, the calm storm on a late-night stage. Another read, silence isn't weakness. Keanu just proved it. Viewers replayed the same 30 seconds over and over. Funny how when someone doesn't play the game, they're called boring or strange. That line echoed in forums, on TikTok, in YouTube comment sections, and across Reddit threads. The conversation shifted. It wasn't about a talk show or a celebrity anymore. It was about how people carry themselves, the dignity of staying calm, the strength of not fighting back, but standing firm anyway. Backstage, James paced, his note cards still in hand, tapping them together over and over. The crew pretended not to notice, but they did. He muttered to himself. He didn't get it. It was just a joke. A makeup artist whispered to a colleague. That wasn't a normal interview, right? The other nodded. Nope, that was something else. Meanwhile, Keanu stood in the hallway, speaking quietly with a stagehand, asking their name, shaking their hand with both of his, thanking them for their work. He was still calm, still steady, still himself. By the time he left the building, the hashtags were already spreading. Hashtag Keanu moment, hashtag heard without shouting. A clip posted late that night carried a simple caption. This isn't just about Keanu. It's about every quiet person who's ever been told they're not enough because they didn't perform loud enough. It racked up 400,000 likes in under 2 hours. As James rode home, staring at his phone, he watched the moment replay. The silence, the way the audience leaned toward Keanu, not him. Something deep inside, beneath his showman's charm and late-night habits, told him this story wasn't over. It had only just begun. The studio lights dimmed, and the audience filed out quietly, not buzzing with the usual post-show excitement. They were reflecting, digesting what they'd seen. Backstage, the mood was split. Keanu walked off calmly, stopping to thank crew members as he passed. No entourage, no rush. He paused to shake hands with a technician, asked their name, and said a quiet, "Thank you." One camera operator whispered to another. He meant every word he said. James, meanwhile, was still pacing, his voice low but sharp. It was just a joke, he muttered to an assistant. He didn't have to make it so serious. The assistant nodded, trying to calm him. The clip's going viral already. It's all over Twitter. But James wasn't listening. His ego had been bruised not by a fight, but by something worse, Keanu's quiet strength, his refusal to play along. A young production assistant, filming behind-the-scenes content, passed James' dressing room just in time to catch him venting. These guys need to stop taking themselves so seriously. This is a comedy show, not group therapy. The assistant hadn't meant to record it, but the audio caught, and within an hour, it was on TikTok with the caption, "Who really missed the point tonight?" The clip exploded, racking up views faster than the interview itself. Meanwhile, Keanu was gone, slipping into a black SUV outside the studio. His assistant showed him the viral clip on her phone, now climbing past 2 million views. Keanu watched for 5 seconds, then turned to look out the window. "Let it be," he said softly, his voice as calm as it had been on stage. By morning, think pieces flooded the internet. Keanu didn't clap back. He redefined the room. Corden mocked stillness. Stillness won. Comment sections erupted, and YouTube reaction videos started popping up, analyzing every word, every glance. Then the leaked backstage audio of James hit again, harder now. "If you don't want jokes, don't come on a comedy show." The internet turned. Keanu gave grace. James gave bitterness, one post read. He asked for authenticity. James gave a script. That same night, Keanu was spotted at a small diner in Burbank, sitting alone, eating quietly. No PR team, no sunglasses, just him, present as always. Someone snapped a photo, and it went viral too with a caption. "Still not explaining, still not performing, just being." The real impact came from a 17-second fan video uploaded later that evening. In it, during the final moments of the segment, Keanu leaned in and said, almost like a whisper, "Be kind, even when it's funny not to be." The room had fallen silent again. The post read, "I was there." It didn't feel like a comeback, it felt like a prayer. By sunrise, the internet had chosen a side. Clips of Keanu's quiet takedown flooded TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, and Reddit. A YouTube video titled "Keanu Didn't Raise His Voice, He Raised the Standard" hit 1.2 million views in under 12 hours. Podcast hosts dissected the moment. Morning shows played the clip on loop, and influencers quoted Keanu's lines like scripture. Even brands jumped in, awkwardly tweeting things like, "You don't need to shout to stand out." Hashtag Keanu Energy. But it wasn't just about Keanu. People saw themselves in him. The quiet one at the table, the person dismissed in a meeting, the one interrupted mid-sentence. The hashtag Your Keanu moment trended worldwide. Stories poured in. "My boss mocked me for being too quiet in meetings. I felt small. Not anymore. I stayed silent at a family dinner when everyone laughed at me. That silence was strength." Journalists dug into old Late Show episodes, asking questions. Was James harsher with guests who didn't play along? Why did his humor rely on someone submitting? A viral Twitter thread compared his interviews with loud comedians versus quieter actors. The pattern was clear. When a guest was bold, James matched them. When they were calm, he poked until something broke. The leaked audio of James complaining backstage. "These guys take themselves too seriously," hit harder now that millions had seen the episode. "If it's just a joke, why are you the only one laughing?" one commenter wrote. Keanu didn't come for therapy. He came for respect. James stayed silent for 48 hours. No tweets, no posts, no comments from his team. Then came his next monologue. The camera panned in, and he opened with a half smile. "Fun week, right? I trended. Always dreamed of going viral, but I was hoping for a dance video, not an existential crisis." The audience gave nervous laughs. He continued, "Next time, I'll just let Keanu host the show. He talks less but hits harder." A few chuckles, but they were flat, uneasy. James looked at the camera, expecting more. It didn't come. Online, the reaction was brutal. He still doesn't get it. He thinks it's about being funny. It's about dignity. Then another leak surfaced, this time audio from after the monologue. James, frustrated, was heard saying, "You can't joke about anything anymore. It's all offense, offense. That line spread like wildfire. "It's not that we can't joke," one influencer posted. "We just stopped laughing at cruelty." While James tried to manage the fallout, Keanu stayed invisible. No statements, no interviews, no rebuttals. But a video surfaced of him at a youth outreach program that same week. He wasn't giving speeches or posing for cameras. He was helping teenagers paint a mural, his hands smudged with color. Someone asked if he'd seen the headlines. He smiled and said, "You don't always have to respond. Sometimes staying true is louder than applause." The clip went viral within hours. The contrast was stark. James on stage, spinning the moment into a punchline. Keanu in a paint-stained shirt, quietly present with kids who didn't care about hashtags. That same night, a photo spread online. Keanu leaving a community center, holding a small child's hand. No press, no cameras, just a volunteer's quiet snapshot. The caption read, "He knew the noise would fade, but the truth wouldn't." The next week, James' show went on. The studio lights still shone, the desk was still polished, but the applause was thinner, the smiles forced. The audience hadn't canceled him, they'd outgrown him. The cultural focus had shifted, not away from humor, but toward what humor costs when it demands someone shrink. The story didn't end with headlines or hashtags. It grew through people. Ordinary people sharing quiet moments when they'd been dismissed or mocked for being too silent. A woman tweeted, "I was told I wasn't leadership material because I didn't speak up enough. Watching Keanu made me feel seen." A teacher shared, "I showed my class the clip. We talked about how silence isn't absence, it's presence. My shyest students spoke more that day than ever before." The hashtag Your Keanu moment returned, not trending but spreading, a quiet wave of stories. People stopped talking about late-night TV and started sharing moments from boardrooms, classrooms, family dinners. Times when they chose stillness and were made to feel small for it. The clip of Keanu's calm, unflinching presence became more than viral content. It became a teaching tool in community centers, schools, even churches. People used it to ask big questions. What do we do when silence is seen as weakness? Why do we laugh at what we don't understand? Why is stillness threatening? Keanu never commented publicly, but he didn't need to. He was seen at another local event, setting up chairs for a youth film screening. No red carpet, no fanfare. A father posted a photo of Keanu crouching down to tie his son's shoelace. No one else around. He didn't look for the light, the post read. It found him, and he didn't step away. Back in the entertainment world, James' show limped forward. Producers were nervous, sponsors were watching, and one executive called it a tone problem. The audience hadn't turned on James, they'd simply moved on, seeking something more real. A final thread posted weeks later summed it up. Everyone has that moment when you either shrink to fit someone's joke or stand tall in silence. If this story reminded you of yours, you're not alone. That's what stayed with people. Not the scandal, not the viral clips, but the pause, the silence that wasn't empty. It was full of dignity, presence, and choice. Because sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that doesn't move.